All right, we are back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan. I'm here with my favorite part-time co-host and Mitch Salazar. And this episode, I think, completes my own personal Mitch Triple Crown. You and I talked this time last week, and then Mitch Cruz and I, and now you again. So let it never be said that the lineup can exist in a Mitch-free universe. The second stop on the 2025 WSL Championship Tour, the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro, it wrapped up over the weekend. It was won by a barnstorming Italo Ferreira, as well as the reigning women's world champion Katie Simmers. I think Abu Dhabi is exactly 12 hours ahead of California, so little bit of a tough hang in terms of the time zone. I'll admit I didn't watch every single wave, but Mitch, that is one of your day jobs on the broadcast feed, so I'm going to lean on you a little bit today. But first things off, man, it's been a few days. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing great. I mean, really sick event. I thought, not only the performance levels, especially on finals day, were awesome. I felt like a lot of the women performed and surpassed their own expectations too. Vahine obviously doing very well. She makes it into finals day for her first big result outside of Tahiti, which is major for her. Erin Brooks has back-to-back quarters. She looked okay. And on the men's side, we had a mixed bag of results. Griffin Colapinto, he's really gone down in the early rounds, given how good he is at those locations. But just overall, a fun event. It was really nice to see the night session again, even though they were super long days. Shout out to our amazing production crew over there in Abu Dhabi. But overall, it was cool. It was fun. I think it's a breath of fresh air in terms of the Championship Tour. Now we're heading into Peniche next month into March, but different rankings. We have two new leaders in terms of the men's and women's, and big considering how Italo has been outside really of the conversation of the top five the last few years. Runner-up in the finals last year. He's world number one right now heading into Portugal, which is a major stop for him, Dave.
For sure. And we have official winners of the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro. We have a new front runner in the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. But before we get to that, Mitch, let's do our own winners and losers. Who have you got for loser number one coming out of the desert?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one for me because personally I love Sally Fitzgibbons. I think she's an awesome person. What she's done for the sport is huge, but overall, the first two events, they have not been good for her. Pipe was real bad, and then here, her top score was only a 5.3 in both the opening round and in the night session. So overall, I feel like she has a lot more work to do before we get into the cutoff, given that there is 5 events now after Abu Dhabi for her to make it back up. But considering how short, the women's top 10 is and how talented a lot of those women are, it's going to be very difficult for her. I think the one major thing to look after Abu Dhabi for Sally Fitzgibbons is that the schedule is really good. The first 2 events, Pipe, she hadn't competed as much there, given that we've only seen that event for the women the last 4 or 5 years now. Abu Dhabi, a major wild card, but she had competed at the Surf Ranch before. Now heading into Portugal, of course, the Australian leg is major, but she hasn't been in Punta Roca. So that's really the one where I'm looking at, okay, how can Sally Fitzgibbons do at a right-hand point break with that kind of weather, especially with the variable? Heading there earlier now, Dave, in the month of April rather than in June, it could potentially be a really good south swell early on, or it could be much smaller than we're expecting.
It's a good one. I love Sally surfing. I got to talk to her a little bit a few weeks ago in Hawaii, which feels like 10 years ago. But, she is a veteran, but she looks like she's strong. Her boards look awesome. She seems like she's in a really good headspace. I think your call out's the right one. Even though she's super experienced, Pipe was not a venue for the women's tour when she was on for many, many years. And then the wave pool as well. It's a newer experience. She surfed wave pools before, but it's newer, right? So I think you're right. I think it'll be interesting to see if she can ramp up a few degrees, because her surfing to me is there. It just maybe needs a little bit more flash, a little bit more speed, all of which she possesses. But she's been to Portugal a ton. Obviously the Australian triple leg in Snapper Rocks, the Bells Beach, and Margaret River, she's well experienced at. We'll see how she goes in El Salvador, but yeah, it's a tough one. I think I was expecting a little bit more from her from the opening 2 events. My first loser, I think after the first day of competition, Stabs Pedro Ramos had a headline that read, "Formal request to CT surfers, stop trying to get tubed." And in the onshore of day one, I think that's a fair request. It was tough to watch that middle section, especially on the right, with the onshore really throwing a wrench into everyone's preparation of the event. You heard it all day. Like, everyone's saying, look, we've been here, we've been training the last few days. We haven't seen a win like this. All of our prep is kind of thrown out the window. And I was thinking about it, and Mitch, I'm going to need your considerably higher surf IQ level of surf expertise on this one for me. But in conditions like that, where it's crumbling, and on that particular tube section, is there anything else that the CT surface can be doing? It seems like the wave really cups out too hard, and intentionally, because it's supposed to be a barrel section, to do any maneuvers. And I don't know if a better approach would have been to try to race it and get ahead of that part of the wave and try maneuvers in front of the tube section, but maybe there's not enough oomph at that part of the wave, or the water isn't moving that right, closer to the foil. But I don't know. It was a bummer. But Mitch, what do you think about that? Was there anything else that the surfers could have done on day one in that really tricky middle part of the wave?
It's an excellent point and an excellent question to really, beg for our audience too, because you're almost asking yourself as a fan, would I rather see somebody get barreled at a man-made wave, or would I rather see them try to go for something major that we don't normally get to see? I feel like the second answer is always going to be the right one here, and it's actually, I don't want to connect straight into my third loser, but that's it. Like the unvariability of conditions, even at a man-made wave, it's open air, dude. Like. Things can change in a quick jiffy. We saw that on finals day when Ethan, stood up on his opening right. They had to resurf that wave because a strong onshore came in. It was a sandstorm too, which is really uncommon for us to have at a surf event, but quite common there in the Middle East. I would personally say, given the instructions that we saw from our head judge, Lily Pejeda, on every single day, the barrel is going to be taken into consideration, but unless it's super deep, it ain't going to score that high. And I just feel like there's just so much more risk in you trying to maneuver through those sections to maybe skip the barrel section. Go for something big. I mean, how many excellent scores did we see alone in the first 2 days? Maybe 2 or 3. On the very first day of just the men, we never saw an excellent score. And I feel like because you're seeing that barrel get considered way too much by the coaches, a lot of those surfers are probably being instructed to go for the barrel to play a little bit safer. I'm not on that side personally. I'd rather see them try to combine maneuvers. And overall, as a fan, you're just thinking to yourself, this is where it gets repetitive. Like, I can see a barrel. I can get barrel there myself personally if I'm on the easiest setting. And perhaps if you're a good enough surfer, you'll get barreled on that same setting too. But it's not something that you're looking at, okay, like, this is entertaining. This is what I want to watch. And yeah, same thing for the judges. I mean, we were in the 5s and 6s range all day long on opening day. And I feel like that really didn't break the ice in terms of the excellent scores that we were expecting to see right there, Dave.
Yeah, maybe that's one for the wave engineers too. I think you're right. Like that third section on both the left and the right, it's a deeper, hollower, ledgier barrel. I think that's fine. Even though some surfers race that a little bit and go for the air section, I think that middle section, I wonder if there's a way to like re-engineer it or design it in future facilities, or even the ones that are out there, where it is maybe bowlier, maybe steeper, but it's not going to be quite a tube for that exact reason, where it's like, no, you need to be trying maneuvers here. You need to be pushing it in this part of your routine or your performance or your run, whatever we're calling it. It just feels like the way it's designed now, and for good reason in a lot of ways, it's really hard to do that, especially if you're coming out of a maneuver and you're feeling like you're behind the section. It's not like you have a lot of space to pump and get out ahead of that. It's like you're locked in, in that section. But yeah, it's tough, So that was your second one too. Is I get that on the loser side. My my second loser. I don't think anyone involved in the Felipe Toledo water photographer incident covered themselves in any kind of particular kind of glory, right? At least in the moment. And look, like accidents happen, but, I saw some criticism of Felipe not even checking to see if the water photographer was okay right away. He was obviously and justifiably really upset, right, in the moment. And yeah, the water photographer, any venue, but especially in a wave pool, disrupting an athlete wave, it's never a good thing. So it was good to see eventually some sportsmanship from Felipe kind of in the aftermath. But I think after his sabbatical year in 2024, he was probably hoping to get off to a much faster start this season than back-to-back nights. And
especially here.
Absolutely.
Especially here.
And I don't know, like, Mitch, what do you think? Like, I got to check. We'll get to fantasy in a second because, spoiler alert, my fantasy team was my third loser. But I think, like, I know Felipe's coming back at this level, right? But even before that incident, it didn't seem like he was at the like untouchable god tier wave pool levels that he was in the past. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. He showed some flaws. I also feel like there were a couple of waves where he probably could have pushed harder. And that comes from not surfing in a major event over the course of a few months, you know? So really, in terms of that, I'm not surprised that he kind of toned it down a little bit, especially going up against Kanoa in that round. Like, that's a tough draw. Kanoa surfed great, by the way. He had a really high heat total in that round, and he still went out there and did his job, so props to him. But overall, yeah, you're right. You know, I think for him, being able to switch off of that, and luckily he's got a month in between events too. Right. Whereas Portugal is a great event for him. He's won there. He's made multiple finals too. But, you know, all the hate that we saw from Tiago, our water photographer, like it was pretty bad. People make mistakes. It's surfing. It just sucks that it had to happen to the guy that it happened to, you know?
Right.
Like, if it would have happened to anybody else, I think people would have been like, oh, dude, like, he probably wasn't going to do that well there anyways. This is Philippe. He's made 2 finals there. He's won at this kind of technology before. And I just think overall, like, we got to look past it. People make mistakes. There's always a bit of controversy, I feel like, in every surfing event too, and especially at the professional level. You can't satisfy everybody. But it's just unfortunate, you know, and I feel like it's something that we're probably going to assess a lot more going into future events, especially at man-made waves, where things are way more in your control. They're probably going to have the water photographer either on the ski or way to the side. They're probably not going to allow them be that close to the lineup, but it is what it is at this point, Dave.
Yeah, and like it's like any situation, like whenever there's a blow up, you know, an emotional blow up, it's very rarely about the actual incident that came right before. It's everything that built up for in some cases decades up until that point. And I mean, I want to say like Tiago, the photographer, talking about, and the entire photography team, world-class water photographers, world-class shooters in all conditions. This stuff happens, but it was a bummer. And like you, like I want to see Felipe back, like at full throttle, and sooner rather than later. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. But we hopped to your third loser about the open air artificial wave early, but who's your third loser coming out of Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it already, but it's safe surfing. And dude, I'm just going to say this to everybody, like, you don't want to go out there and try to win a heat in a perfect wave like this. And given not every wave's exactly the same, we saw that a lot at this event. But you shouldn't be trying to win a heat here with 2 5s. Like, come on. We're talking about a world-class wave. You're one of the best surfers in the world. It's not like you didn't have time to prepare for this either. Everybody that got more than 14 points, you guys did your job. We saw Jackson Bunch have a 9, which was fantastic. And that 9 anywhere else would have probably been a 15. You know, like, it was that good.
Right.
But overall, dude, like, I feel like so many people, especially on the men's side, opening day, like, they were just toning it down way too much. And especially given that it's a format that really is constructed for them to do well at. You have the opening round, first go straight into the round of 16, and then you have a chance in the night session. And given those waves were back-to-back in the night session, they weren't in the opening round. So you had time to assess, you had time to take a breath, get back on the bike if you wanted to stay warm. And I just feel like too many people tried to play it safe. It worked out against them. And the people that didn't, they ended up succeeding in the event, including our finalist, Real Wida. I feel like every single wave that guy surfed, he was surfing at 110%. He wasn't trying to not lose. He was trying to win every single time he stood up.
Yeah, that's good advice. Don't go down sad. You know, like, don't go out sad. Maybe I'm with you. We can put that on the lineup T-shirt. That's another good line. Don't go out sad. And final loser for me, I touched on it. My WSL fantasy team, we got annihilated. We will talk about it. We'll talk about the lineup podcast Mega League in a little bit. But I am disappointed in myself. I made some poor decisions. We'll get into it. But enough losers. Mitch, who you got for winners coming out of the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro?
I'm just going to check my fantasy right now. I know we're going to talk about it later, but I feel like I did pretty good. I think I'm still 150 in our league. Yeah, 135. I'm doing all right. So shout out Mitch Tails
That's
team.
Pretty well. That's a good segue to winners, Mitch. I'll give you that.
Dude, my first winner, and I'm proud of this, are the Goofy Footers. Let's go, baby. One of the most memorable events in recent years for the Goofies. There was one present in every single men's quarterfinal and 4 in the women's quarters. Italo wins. keeps the dream alive for the right foot forward surfers. Jackson Bunch, Yago Dora, Miguel Pupo, Sari Lindblad, Aaron Brooks, Vahine Fierro, Caroline Marks, and Italo. Those 8 people in the finals day, to me, it has to be one of the few events we've seen, at least in recent memory, that we've seen that many goofy footers do well. I know it's at a man-made wave, but still, Dave, we got to take a lot of pride in that. I was really stoked to see it.
Yeah, and we've been hearing like murmurs that the Surf Abu Dhabi, the left was actually better, than Surf Ranch, where I think the consensus is the right's better, and that was before kind of the wind issue. So I'm with you. My first winner, I'll go in order of what wowed me, and my first is the rookie Jackson Bunch, who fits in with your goofy foot agenda. I think it's a fair criticism of the wave pools that the routines, the runs, the performances, whatever we're calling them, they can get redundant. And even for the world's best surfers, maybe actually more for the world's best surfers, because they're all, the ceiling and floor of their ability is so close. But I think, and this goes for pros and civilians alike, there's an element of conservatism that happens in a lot of surfers' approaches at wave pools. And it seems really like unavoidable for most, even the CT surfers. And Jackson Bunch's opening round performance was the first wave of the event where I sat up and went, ooh, wow, like that looked looser and faster and punchier than kind of everything else I'd seen today. And obviously he would go on to post a quarterfinal result. So huge props to Jackson Bunch for not only navigating like a really tricky event, but also just performing really well on top of it. I think he's going to carry a lot of confidence throughout the season for that.
And beating, quote unquote, our defending men's champion too, right? Griffin in that round. And, having to surf first, I feel like can be beneficial to some, especially those who have a lot more to prove, and those who are defending like Griffin, maybe it cost him because he had to go up against knowing that he already had to post an excellent score at that point. So
yeah,
I like that in the opening round, you didn't have to go back-to-back with waves. I felt like round of 16 forward, it was cool that your first run had to be you go right, then you go left. I feel like fatigue was starting to set in at that point for a lot of guys. But props to Jackson, man. I mean, especially when it comes to finishing with that alley-oop, but then getting an extra little reverse at the end too. Adding that extra 0.2, 0.3 to the scoreline was major for him. Knocks out one of the best ever to do it right there in Abu Dhabi and Griffin. My second winner, I already mentioned him, but this guy really deserves a lot of credit. The first Indonesian ever to qualify for the World Championship Tour. He's made 2 finals in less than 3 years of being full-time on the CT. It's Rio Waida. The excellence of his approach, his no-fear kind of attitude, and more than anything, I just love the dog in him. It feels like this guy's one of those destined to really do top things for the Asian region. Multiple-time Olympian now, Dave, and the kid's less than 25 years old. Like, let's consider that. Like, he has a lot more room to grow. He's already faced off against some of his idols on the World Championship Tour. But once again, he has the room to grow to be able to be somebody to win an event, multiple ones, and eventually qualify for the finals and contend for a world championship. I think we're going to see excellent things from Rio this year in 25.
Yeah, it's a great one. He surfs so well. And I think it was kind of across the board, like these super speedy, like very, very technically proficient surfers, your Kanoas and your Italos, your Mollies, your Rios, did really well there. I think, there's that old saying, like, in skating over thin ice, our safety is in our speed. And I think there's a little bit of that. Like, if you've got that extra gas compared to your competitors, at a venue like the wave pool, you maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident going for maneuvers where everyone else is auguring a little bit more towards conservatism. So great pick. My second winner, it's a little bit related to my first, and it's actually the inverse of one of your losers, but I feel like there is a very clear distinction on the CT between the few surfers that surf the wave pool really well and everyone else, right? And I know that's maybe a strange thing to say. Every wave has specialists like Pipeline, Jeffreys Bay, etc. But the wave pool, especially at the elite level, is meant to kind of democratize performance. And while the opportunity does, right? Everyone gets a version of the same wave. There seems to be like a very clear dividing line between the surfers that look really comfortable out there and loose and not surfing safe, and then everyone else. We mentioned Jackson and you mentioned Rio, but Ethan, Jack Robinson, Miguel Pupo, Kano Igarashi, Yago Dora on the men's side, and then Molly Picklum, Gabriella, Brian, and Vahine on the women's side. They all looked a cut above their peers from the opening round. And of course, you know, eventual winners, Katie Simmers and Italo Ferreira, forget about it. Like, so my second winner is that tier of surfers. And I guess we can start calling them like wave pool specialists, just like we have pipe specialists and J-Bay specialists, etc. They just separated themselves at the very, very elite level by virtue of being, as we said, like comfortable and loose out there.
It's a great pickup right there with the speed. I feel like at a wave pool tech like this one, the Kelly Slater Waveco tech, it's easier to shave off speed than it is to manufacture it. So I'm on the side of generating speed early on, especially with your first turn. If you can, you know, and especially with the markers out there in the lineup, there's potential for you to try to catch the wave earlier on, have a foam climb, generate speed off of that. And I feel like Jack was one of those guys that ended up actually being a little bit deeper on takeoff, and it benefited him because he got his best result ever at a wave pool. Actually, first time ever that he's actually won a heat at a wave pool, which to me is kind of surprising given how well he's done since his debut on the Championship Tour. But overall, speed is your friend out there, and I truly agree with that, and kind of goes hand in hand with my last winner, and it's the two event champions. Now leading both the men's and women's ranking, Italo and Katie Simmers. Their approach to this one was way more different. Italo's made back-to-back finals at the wave pool now. He lost to Griffin in a real close final in 2023 at the Surf Ranch. Now Katie, semifinals in 2023. She wins here in a back-and-forth final, too. What a final between the two of them, her and Molly Picklum. I felt their approach was awesome, though. Before, I'd been critical of Italo at this kind of technology before because he kind of surfs with too much space, and he hadn't really been in rhythm with this wave up until he made the final in 2023. Now I feel like he settled down a lot more. It truly seemed like he was in control of his rhythm and what he wanted to perform on the wave overall. And having a routine before you paddle out is something good. You still need to be adaptive in the moment, though, and I feel like he did that so well with that last end section on the barrel, especially going left. Had the alley-oop, transition into the carve right at the end, got him a lot of excellent scores, especially in the final. Now you transition into Katie. How many times have you seen somebody do a roundhouse cutback in the very opening section of that wave? And given how both of us have had a wave in this kind of technology, that is extremely difficult. You're losing so much speed on takeoff by doing that. It might set you up behind the section overall, but it just feels like they were in control of what they wanted to perform at, and they had a vision in their mind when they paddle out each and every time. Congrats to both of them, now leading both rankings. And given that both of them have won in Portugal, major moment for them with the month in between events.
I couldn't agree more. I thought like Italo looked untouchable, and that roundhouse with Katie, like she kind of talked about it, I think, beforehand, and I'm like, where's she gonna do this? And it made sense to me when she did it, because I'm like, that does make sense. Like, you just have to race out right away and like try to do it, and it was still a little bit difficult. But back to your point, like, I actually think that maneuver was one of a bag that the surfers who performed well there had, where it set them up pace-wise for the wave. Like, she came off and hit the section at a point the wave was able to immediately come off the bottom and jam a turn after her rebound, and it just looked different, you know. And so I think that's a great pick. You know, related, third winner for me were actually the folks in attendance for both the men's and women's finals. It actually looked like a really good time. It was, you know, kind of that dusk lighting, end of the day, and the people there were exposed to two really impressive finals performances. You mentioned the women's final between Katie Simmers and Molly Picklum, went down to the final wave, and back to Katie, I am not really seeing any added psychological weight on the shoulders of Katie as a world champion this season.
True. So
you know,
true.
And I think it's a huge credit to her, to her coach, Tom Whitaker, and everyone around her. Like, she looks like she's having fun. She's surfing loose, and she seems to be a cut above everyone else right now, which is so dangerous, right? Because I think you can see that with world champions every year. It doesn't matter if they're like young or sort of older, whatever it is. They come back and there's a spotlight on them, and there's the added kind of weight of expectations. If we had to throw darts at a board and go, well, what's going to bring her down ahead of the season, I would have said that's a contender, because she is so young. She's just nailing it, you know? And in the men's final, again, I thought you nailed it. Italo is undeniable. He is surfing at a 100% different level in these pools than anyone else on the planet right now. He is so locked in. He, as you said, he is in control of his routine. He is being adaptable. He's probably the fastest surfer on tour right now. And I think the fans that got to watch all that go down in the twilight, and big winners from the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro.
And just wanna add something on Katie right there too. I feel like there's nothing that will get to her either. You know, like, how many times did she had to surf for a score in this event? And it just seemed like she went out there and she's like, dude, like, I might lose right now, but I don't care. Like, and she goes out with that kind of attitude. And like, she still smokes Molly in the final, you know, on the last wave. Like, she has a fall in the last barrel section, but I remember doing the final. I'm like, dude, like, I still don't know. Like, I feel like she might even get the score based off of what she did early on the wave. She did. She turned the final. And I mean, I feel like she had to do that at least 5 or 6 times in this event. And she outperformed everybody's expectations. And just so stoked to see her on the tour right now. And given that she's only 19, I think we're so fortunate to be able to have her in women's surfing at the moment, Dave.
Couldn't agree more. Well, that wraps up winners and losers for the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk surfboards. All right, welcome back to the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. Let's talk some surfboards in the tub. It is time to discuss where we're at with the 2025 Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. Now into its 3rd year, a quick reminder of how we measure performance at the CT level for board builders. The Vissla CT Shaper Rankings, it's a combined men's and women's ranking. We count all surfers finishing in the quarterfinals or better. Their shapers receive the same rankings points that correlate to their respective surfer finishes. The higher the surfer places, the more points the shaper receives. And we are tracking the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings from Pipeline through Tahiti. In addition to being honored as the 2025 CT Shaper of the Year at the WSL Awards, the 2025 Vissla CT Shaper Rankings will be gifted an overnight stay and surf at Surf Ranch Lemoore, courtesy of the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch and the WSL. Maybe we'll get the Surf Abu Dhabi facility in on the mix in the future. But let's get to it. We got surfboards in the tub. When the dust had settled, literally and figuratively, I suppose, at the end of CT2, it was Marcio Zuvi, Taylor Clark, Yufu Penrose, and the Sharp Eye Surfboards team vaulting over the former frontrunner of Channel Islands to take the #1 spot on the current Vissla CT Shaper Rankings, with a men's runner-up finish from Rio Waida, a men's semifinal finish from Jack Robinson, and a men's quarterfinal finish from Kanoa Igarashi. Mitch, your thoughts on the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro and the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings?
Yeah, obviously an excellent event for Sharp Eye. You know, they dominated on the men's side. You know, not only did they have Kanoa finally, you know, get to a point where I felt like he's comfortable with. He surfed great up pipe, but his result just didn't show. It did here. He beats Philippe in the round of 16. Jack Robinson, his overall best performance ever at a wave pool. He makes it into the semis, a real close one right there with Italo, the actual champion. And then, of course, Rio Waida. We talked about this kid all day long, and he's done some incredible things so far in his first 2.5 years on the championship tour. Big for him. I would still want to say Channel Islands, they're right behind in second, though. I mean, less than 1,000 points in between them. Major pickup from Lost. Of course, Caroline, Gabby Bryan, they're back in the mix right now. 34,555 points. And, of course, DHD, not the best event for them, but Ethan Ewing, to me, did perform and really surpass expectations here once again. I feel like his rail surfing is never going to go out of style. And it's so interesting that he still does this well. And he's made finals day every single time he's surfing in a pool, but he still does so well, given that a lot of people only think it's going to be aerial surfing doing well here. Like, it's all rail for him, and he's just really outperformed my own expectations. Loses a real close semi to Rio Waida. To me, one of the best heats you'll ever see in the history of surfing, especially right there. But I do want to say, you know, Timmy Patterson, they get the win, obviously, on the men's side with Italo. I was kind of expecting Gallon to do a little bit better on their side. I think what caused him is that he really hadn't had the practice runs. Yeah. Because remember, up until John gave up his spot on the CT this year, he hadn't been invited or hadn't gone to Abu Dhabi to practice because he was outside of qualification. So once that happened, it's like, dude, I'm already in Hawaii. Like, I'm going to surf over here. There's no meaning for me to go to Abu Dhabi, come back, and then eventually go for the Championship Tour event. So I feel like that's what cost him. But overall, dude, like Sharp Eye, they're in the mix, and Marcio's obviously been very mad about us not talking about him being the front runner for everything. Now he is, and they got the lead at the moment, Dave.
It's a great point. Last week on the podcast, we had Mitch Cruz, one of my three Mitches, former CT surfer, current senior director of surfing experiences at Surf Abu Dhabi, and all-around great guy.
Ripper.
He told me that unlike Lemoore, the Surf Abu Dhabi water is actually salt water fed in from the Arabian Sea, which is right next to the island there. And with that in mind, he said, we're likely to see more PU boards in the event than epoxies. One epoxy that stood out to me was, Jason Stevenson and JS Industries built one for Miguel Pupo. And I know you and I are messaging about it, but Miguel was riding Zero Fusion model. It was a swallowtail in Hi-Fi 3 construction. It looked really sparky for him. I mentioned Jackson Bunch kind of woke me up. Miguel as well. Whole event, that board looked really, really good. Mitch, what did you notice? You obviously watched every wave and commented on every wave in the live arena. What did you see in terms of equipment? Was there mostly polyurethane boards, or were there a few more epoxies like Miguel rode?
Well, Bella Kenworthy was on her trusty ECT board from Channel Islands. I'm not sure about the model. I want to say it was either a Rook 15 or a CI Pro. But that to me looked excellent. I'm always on the side of having a little bit more buoyancy under your feet at a wave like this, given that it's still salt water out there in comparison to the fresh water that we see at most wave pools overall. I loved Miguel's board though, and we were chatting back and forth about that. I was like, dude, it looks so good going right and going left, which for a lot of people they like to switch things up right there. I know Vahine did that almost every single time that she surfed. But overall, to me, having a little bit shorter, stubbier board that fits in every single section, it might not look as knifey as you'd probably see Ethan do or maybe Kanoa do overall. But in terms of comfort level, to me, Miguel just looked comfortable every single time he stood up on a wave. And this guy had to go through many different rounds. And so far, he's having an excellent year, Dave. I mean, number 3 in the rankings at the moment. He has 2 quarterfinals, surfed well at Pipe, surfed amazing right here. I'm on the side of always having options and something different to ride there, given that you don't want to mess with your mindset and stuff like that. If you're needing a score, and especially if it's an excellent score, you might just have to go and say, you know what, dude, F it. I have to go out and outperform everybody. And if it's a board that I feel like is going to get the job done, let me paddle out on that thing.
Yeah, it's a good point, And as we've been saying since the start of the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings program, not all board builders are created equal. Some have really big teams, others have really small teams. And the CT Shaper Rankings, it's an opportunity for us to talk about and celebrate all of them. And at the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro, you mentioned it already, we saw some really impressive performances from the smaller board programs. The men's winner, Idlo Fajera, he is one of only 2 CT team riders for Timmy Patterson's. And the women's winner, Katie Simmer, she is the sole team rider for Boar Surfboards out of San Diego. So I think it's worth shouting both of them out. You don't need a huge team to make a huge impact on tour. And huge congrats to Timmy Patterson and Chris Borst, as well as, Jackson Bunch. He is out there on a Minami. He's had a quarterfinal finish. So I thought that was a interesting note as far as the CT Shaper Rankings go from Surf Abu Dhabi Pro.
Right, of course, you're seeing Channel Islands still, depending on the surf region you're in. But, we're always going to talk about the smaller guys, too. And, we've talked about Chris Borst, Glenn Minami, Timmy Patterson, who top Matt Biolos had a shape, by the way, too. Only has 2 guys on tour, and before that only had 1. And that guy right now is leading the men's rankings. So we're obviously going to talk about that guy all year long.
Yeah, it was rad. Even if you're looking at the crossover in terms of board builders performing on the men's CT versus the women's CT, the labels that have points on both sides of the equation right now, we've got Channel Islands, we've got Lost, and we've got DHD.
Yep.
They're Sharp Eye, as we pointed out. They haven't collected any women's points yet, and they're leading the rankings on the strength of their men's team right now. Patterson, you mentioned Al Cleland Jr. and Idlo Fajera. JS Industries collected points on the men's side. Glenn Minami has only got Jackson Bunch, but he had a great event in Surf Abu Dhabi. And then David Silva for Slater Designs earlier in the season. And then on the women's side, you've got Chris Borst, who's collecting all of his points off of Katie Simmers. Yep. And he's actually in the combined rankings top 5 right now. And then you've got John Peisel, who's got two-time world champion Tyler Wright repping his brand this year. So
by the way.
Yeah, right. With John gone. And, John Peisel, he is a world-class shaper. He's world-renowned. He's got a small team, but an impactful team. And, even though John's taking the year off right now, we've kind of laughed about it over the years. It's like, well, is really anybody moving foam as far as people wanting to buy surfboards compared to John? Like, he has redefined, what board performance looks like. And I think for someone like John Peisel, he's like, I'm good. If I got John, no problem.
I think that's the point to highlight right here. Do they need more riders? Because the ones that they have are already successful. They're getting their brands. And is that really their goal and purpose of shaping boards? Probably not. Like, Timmy's so stoked with just having a small factory right there in San Clemente, Dana Point. Scott Metzner, who runs a store right there in San Clemente. Like, having Italo and Alan kind of really attest to what he wants to do. That's make world-class boards for not only people that want to try them, for his friends and everybody in the local community. Same thing with Chris Borst. Like, that guy's not even originally a surfer. He was an excellent skater back in the 80s. Actually had a couple of clips in some major skate films in the early 80s and in the 90s. But, just having Katie and, of course, a lot of local community. Reed Van Wagoner, who's a great regional QS surfer here in North America, also rides his boards. And I think that's just something that, as surfers, we need to emphasize more than anything. Like, what's my purpose in life? I want to make high-quality surf crafts for people that just want to go out there and ride something every single day, or they want to perform on the World Championship stage.
It's a good point. And that's like back to the whole reason I geek out on the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. It is a combination of two things, right? It is like the objective results and performance at the elite level of competition, but also surfer agency, right? Because the surfers are electing to work with these different shapers. Some of them want that one-on-one relationship. Some of them are happy to work as part of a bigger program. And then the output being like, what is actually working across those two variables, right? Because as we've talked about in today's episode, your Glenn Minamis, your Timmy Pattersons, your Chris Borsts are having a demonstrable impact and the results because of those relationships. And in the past, we've seen, in terms of cut through, in terms of, mass impact, having a diverse team, we talked about it before the season started, and how diverse the Lost Surfboards program is in terms of different aspects of team riders going to have different strengths at different venues. Early days in 2025, but that's why I geek out on this. I think it's just interesting to follow the trend lines.
Well, and let me put it this way. Are you going to ride something that mostly your friends and most of your peers are riding just because you know that it's going to perform well? Like, if consistency there, based off of the people that are riding it, it's like almost a no-brainer to go with that decision. But, hey, I want to think outside of the box. I know I'm going to get one-on-one attention and one-on-one detail right here. But that also means that I have to take time out of my own personal time, invest into my shaper right there, getting into the shaping A with him, and making sure that I'm relaying that kind of information from both the ocean and the shaping bay to him or her, depending on the person. But, it varies. And I know Kelly was very direct with Al Merrick when they used to work behind the scenes. It's obviously working right now with Britt and his entire team. That guy's at almost every event, by the way. He puts in a lot of time with that. I know Marcio's done it in the past with Philippe quite as well. I mean, he's the most successful surfer he has on their team. And then you look at Matt and what he's done with an incredible group of young, talented kids from his hometown. And that kind of one-on-one relationship right there, and the entire crew over at Mayhem and Lost Surfboards, it's so personal, Dave, that they will easily go out and make sure that they're getting a board in 2-3 days' time for an event that they have coming because they love the board so much. They want a replica, a duplicate of this one. They're like, hey, dude, I need you to work overnight right now. I'm going to pay you double time, but we're getting these boards out for these kids right now because they know what they want into their feet. Like, that's kind of the attention to detail I see from a lot of the shapers nowadays.
It's a good point. Like, and I like how you brought up like Britt Merrick at Channel Islands is actually there at every event. And I think it boils down to like capacity, you know, of like you can have a huge team if you can give them the amount of time and care, right? Like, and that doesn't mean you have to spend 168 hours every week with one team rider. Far from it, right? And Chris Borst doesn't do that with Katie Simmers, like Glenn Manami doesn't do that with Jackson Bunch. But if you have your support network, if you have your shapers and your sanders and your team managers, and you have the bandwidth and you can be there, then it does become a one-on-one relationship. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Chris Borst and Katie Simmers before we end this segment, Mitch, because I would really like to bring both Chris and Katie on for separate episodes. I think they're really interesting. I think everyone, obviously you and I have talked about, but everyone in the surfing world over the last few years has identified Katie as someone where it's like, well, Chris is not sort of an internationally renowned shaper. He doesn't have a huge program. Like, if one of these bigger labels wanted to get her, they probably could. I wonder if that would have turned out differently if she hadn't had so much success early on, right? Where it's like, obviously wanted to stay with what was working for her from the QS, the CS to the CT, right? Got on the CT. If she'd had a few years of like no wins or not making the finals or no world titles, like any surfer, I'm sure they start going, well, what do I need to tweak here? Like what needs to change? And surfboards are obviously tier one target for those conversations. I think what you said before makes sense. It's like, hey, she has the proof of concept already in her head because she was so successful so early on. So if any of those other programs were looking at her, she had a stronger foundation within herself to kind of go, no, I'm good. And clearly it's working, right? Like,
I wanna talk about when I first saw Katie. And that was, I want to say it was 2015, 2016. John Daniels, who is a good friend of mine, he's a former judge. You know him, doing
Great
the regional
surfer.
QS. Amazing surfer. Coaches a lot of young stars in both Oceanside and throughout Southern California. Love the guy. Does an amazing job and has worked with Katie a lot before. And I remember judging a local surf contest here in SoCal, and Katie was in it. She was in the U12s. She stands up on her very first wave. I give her a 10-point ride immediately, and it's unanimous. It's across the board. I go down on my next break, and I see John, and I talk to him for the short time that I have, and I'm like, dude, who's that young girl you're working with? She rips. She's amazing. He's like, oh, yeah, that's Katie. And I'm like, where's she from? Who is she? Oh, like, yeah, she's from the same town, Oceanside, where I'm from. She surfs real good, and younger brother Tim is also a real good surfer. And I'm like, dude, like, yeah, let me know when she's surfing again. Like, I want to see her again if I'm not scoring her. And she goes on to win the event. And in that same event is Sori Lindblad and Bella Kenworthy. All three of them make the final. And Katie smokes them. And look at where they are right now. Yeah. And I'm telling you, that was maybe 10 years ago. Right. And she already had technique and foundation. In that moment, she was riding a Chris Borst surfboard. That's more than a decade of relationship right there. One-on-one, talking directly to that person. And I think it started with John Daniels, who's been a big team rider for Chris Borst in the past too. So you have somebody that's local to the area who's shaping your own boards. You know where that person lives. You're in direct contact with them all the time. You have a trusted source that you work with all the time in John Daniels. So there's 3 tiers right there where things are perfect, and there's a green light the entire time. And you search onto the professional scene, she's one of the only 2 surfers ever to deny a spot on the Championship Tour after qualifying. The other one being Taj Burrow. We all know how successful he was on the Championship Tour. Makes it back after qualifying, wins in her very second year on the CT, the youngest world champion ever. And now she still goes out and says, nothing has changed with fame. Maybe I have a little bit more money in my pocket, but I'm still sticking to what works for me, traveling with my family, being myself, and riding for the same boards. If that's not authentic, I don't know what else is, Dave. Chris and Katie, they go hand in hand. What an amazing duo.
I like it. Well, that'll end us for this week's episode segment on the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. We're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have to talk about fantasy, but then we're going to answer listener questions, so I'm looking forward to that. We'll be right back.
All right, guys, we're back with the Lineup Podcast. I'm your part-time co-host, Mitchell Salazar, and that is the great Dave Prodan. We're going to start off in this segment with our fantasy teams and our lineups that we saw over at the Surf Abu Dhabi Pro, and we're going to be talking about the fantasy rankings, too. This year, the Lineup Pod is running at CT Fantasy Contest. We'll be playing all season long and awarding the overall top 3 fantasy winners at the end of the season with gift cards to the WSL store valuing $50 to $150. And of course, Dave, update on the fantasy rankings within the Lineup Fantasy Mega League Top 5 after Abu Dhabi. Number 5, 808 Kainoa S1. Congrats. Number 4, Black Tips. Nice nickname. Number 3, Elvis 63. Number 2 is Mike Mahalo. And taking the W after the Lineup Fantasy Mega League, it is after Abu Dhabi, is Mateus Guilherme MG. So Mateus Guilherme, congrats. 562.62 points. And he is also in the overall rankings lead, Dave. 1,065.90, followed right behind Surf Dog, DAWG, 1,034.30. Those guys are in the thousands right now, Dave. I'm looking at my fantasy lineup. After this event, in our league, I'm at 470.11. That is 135 within our league. I did okay. I'm stoked.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's fortunate that you and I aren't eligible to win the prizes in the Lineup Podcast Mega League. I am at 689. I don't know how many teams are in the league. I guess if there's like 2 million, that's pretty good. But if there's like 700, then that makes sense. I was checking before. I think I am event ranked from Surf Abu Dhabi, I think, for the entire group, 41,959th. So suboptimal, as I would put it. But I'll run through my picks, and then you can laugh at me, and then I'll run through your picks and applaud you. But it's like any selection. I mean, we think we joked about it. We're like, surfing's such an odd sport that like the more insight you think you have, the worse you're going to do. Cause you're like, that didn't make sense. Like this person should have done really well. What happened? But, so all the time, like my fantasy picks are like a mix of, that was a good pick. And then like a bunch of like, those should have worked out. And then it's like, that was dumb. And so, women's side for my tier A, I went with Molly Picklum, which I thought was a good pick. Wasn't the best pick. It would have been Katie Sivers, but I thought Molly, looked great. I picked her because she's very technically proficient. She's very fast and she's very focused. And I thought she was going to do well, and she did do very well. On the women's side, tier B, I went with Lakey Peterson. Didn't pan out for me too well, unfortunately. And then my power surfer was actually Caroline Marks. And that didn't pan out super great either. Reason I went with her as a power surfer, and maybe this is like, I need to like update my internal notes, but during that COVID year, we did some of those countdown events, like the exhibition events. And one of those was the Battle in the Basin. It was like a night surfing event, and had like not the entire tour, but a bunch of men, bunch of women. And Caroline Marks was like untouchable. And she was just so wind-up-y. Her technique was so great on her backhand, and just bang, bang, was like just smashing these waves. And I'm like, maybe people are sleeping on Caroline a little bit. I think I'm going to get something out of it. Quarterfinal finish, not the best. And did I have Joanne? Did Joanne Defay even surf? Did I miss this?
She did.
She did. Okay, sorry. I'm looking at my I'm looking at my scores. I'm like, I didn't get.
She looked off though. She did look off.
Yeah, and she's coming back. She missed the first event, so that's how that rolls. Men's team went with eventual winner Idolo Ferreira and Kanoa Igarashi in my tier A. Pretty happy with those. Good team. Tier B, I went with Felipe Toledo. Also picked him for my power surfer.
So did I. I blew it.
I'm like, this is how I'm going to get my points. This is what's going to happen. Didn't work out. Ethan Ewing, Jack Robinson, both did pretty well, right? Semifinal finishes, so good job by them. Jordy Smith, probably like a little bit of a zag pick, but I'm like, he's bigger, he's stronger.
He had an 8.
He did, yeah, and he surfs these facilities really well.
Yeah.
I think what I was looking at there is just point of difference. I'm like, he might be getting better scores because he's bigger and stronger than most of the field, and he might be doing different kinds of turns. I think the wind conditions sort of played into that, but didn't pan out for me. And then Tier C, Yago Dora, I like that pick. Mateus Hurdy, also like that pick.
Yeah,
didn't really pan out on the scorecard though.
Yeah, dude, I don't know how you did that bad. Like your team was actually
that's a great point.
I props to your team, Dave. You did very well. We both had the event winners. I went Tier A with Caitlin Simmers. I had her as my power surfer, so I did very well right there. I had Gabby Ryan. I thought she surfed amazing. Had a real close heat with Katie right there. Had an excellent score in that one, too, or close to excellent, I want to say.
Yeah.
In that one. Caroline was one of my picks, too. I feel like she surfed a bit conservatively right there in the important rounds, especially on the left. I feel like she needed to give a little bit more. And I also had Erin Brooks. And in my defense, I did hype her up a little bit in our post-pipe episode. I thought she was going to do a little bit better here. I almost feel like she's still struggling with the pressure aspect of things. Like she hasn't fully surpassed her own expectations personally. She's going to get there, though. And I feel like it'll take her a few events to be able to do that. There's a lot of surfing left to do. On the men's side, I had our event winner. I had Italo as my Tier A pick with Miggy. I went with Mickey.
Good one.
Yeah. He had another quarterfinal finish. I'm really stoked with that result. Super happy for him, too. He's in the top 10 right now at number 3 after 2 events. I feel like he's going to make the cut, and he's going to have an excellent year, too. Tier B, I talked about him already. Philippe had the incident right there with our water photographer. He ends up bowing out in the round of 16. He was my power surfer, though. I had Ethan Ewing, who did amazing. I had a Griffin, who I thought was going to do better. He lost to Jackson Bunch. And to be honest, my only friendly fire, I made sure to work it out, and my only friendly fire was Griffin going up against Jackson. I was willing to lose one of them, though. I was willing to lose one of them. I lost Griffin. Jackson made it to the quarters. He got his own personal best. I had Rio, which I'm amazed on, and I'm super stoked about. He made the final. And
great pick.
His second or best result tied up with the final he had in Fiji. And I had Yago, too. And I'm just going to touch on Yago real quick once again. He surfed great, but I feel like the score that he needed on the right being so low, like there was no doubt in my mind that he was going to get it. He needed a 5 at that point on his final run, and he just wasn't able to do it. And I feel like so far he still hasn't really peaked, if you get what I'm saying, in his CT surfing this year. Ends up losing in the elimination round at Pipe, and then here, even though 5th is good, when we look at the stats overall, he still has the 3rd highest wave ever at the surf ranch, and it's on the left.
It's a great point. And, back to your note on like, oh man, what the picks weren't that bad. Like, how did we fall so far? The lineup podcast mega league is truly a mega league. There are a lot of teams. We can spend all day looking at who did well, et cetera. But if you look at some of the top teams, I think a huge point of difference is who you pick to be your power surfer, right? And if I picked Caroline and Felipe, that didn't pan out for me. If you picked Italo and Katie, which were very like sensible picks to be like, these are my power surfers, you're basically adding like 3 to 4 people in the aggregate, And so I think good tip for the future is, not that you're not trying to double your points with your power picks, but those are essential. And if you're missing those power picks and other people in the league are hitting them, it becomes real rough.
Oh, and to be fair, like Mateus Guillermo MG, like what the hell, dude? Like, is every surfer counting or something like that? Like, what did you do to be able to like lead both our league and the overall rankings? Like, I seriously want to know where your success comes from, because even though we speculate on these things right here, it might not be the overall truth. Maybe you just had literally everybody who made the quarters on. And if you did, congrats, because that's amazing. But
hold on, I can pull his team up.
You can?
Yeah, I got it here. Okay. So this, okay. Let's make sure I got the right. Oh, yeah. Okay. Mateus Guillermo MG. Here's his team from Surf Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
Tier A, Katie Simmers with the power.
Okay.
Power hit. Mm-hmm. So the total for Katie Simmers with the power hit, 101.12 points.
That's almost a fourth. That's almost a fourth of my points.
Exactly. Compare that to Gabby Bryan, who made the semifinals, 29.55 points. Right? So power picks is the way to go. So he did have, did have Gabriella Bryan, Caroline Marks, quarterfinal finish, 11.8. Aaron Brooks, quarterfinal finish, 14.33. On the men's side, did the same thing. Italo Ferreira as his power surfer. Italo as a power surfer, 146.56 points.
Too many excellent scores. Yeah, too many excellent scores. Oh, my
God. And then Miguel Pupo, 28.09. You're right. Hold on. Only one of their surfers didn't make the quarterfinals. That was Griffin Colapinto.
Dude.
So.
Damn.
Mateus Guilherme MG. Man.
I know.
Share the crystal ball, dude.
For real. I got to talk to him literally days before we start over in Peniche and see what he's got thinking about the forecast over there. But props to him, dude. Like,
I think, you can bet on surfing. I can't bet on, you and I can't, but people can bet on surfing. Mm-hmm. And as that becomes more and more of a thing in the future, if it does, I wonder if we're going to see any of these fantasy handicappers become paid handicappers. Because it's hey, if you can prove that you can consistently pick winners, it's why wouldn't they want to get you to go, okay, well, yeah, we need to make money off of everybody, so you need to tell us who's going to win.
I think it's super fun when you have a big angle. Obviously ours, you get a lot of rat stuff in the WSL store. There's Yetis, there's all these different types of merch. But when you have a board waiting for you at the end of the year too, as the winner of your league, to me it adds a little extra incentive if it's a custom one. Hey, dude, you're either getting a Mayhem, you're getting a Pizel, you're getting whatever, a JS, a CI, but it's custom dims. You can pick any model you want, and it's, of course, really what you're looking for. Woo, having that at the top, the little carrot hanging at the end right there, that to me is just little extra motivation right there. So I feel like Mateus kind of has that up his sleeve, Dave. But congrats to the guys making top 5. Congrats to the people in top 5 overall rankings. Surf Dog, you're my guy. You're at number 2 overall rankings. Shout out to you. Hope you do well over in Peniche. And just before we get into the listener questions, anything we should look forward to? I know there's a month. We obviously don't know what the forecast is going to be like. But overall, Italo Philippe, 2 former champions. Griffin's won there multiple times. He's our defending men's champion. Joanne, underrated. Very good at beach break. She's won. Caroline has won there before. I feel like she's due for a big result. Hasn't done well since the finals. Who else are we thinking, Dave, women's side that we need to do and look about?
Oh, I mean, Nadia Aristarbe?
She's probably going to get in, right?
Yeah, if she gets in, she might have the local advantage. So, yeah. Keep an eye on it.
I want to say Brisa is likely to either make the final or win, just because she has catching up to do. She's at number 10 in the rankings right now, and she didn't surf great in Abu Dhabi either. Mm. I want to say Lakey can either smash or do bad there, but I'm going to go with smash instead. And I feel like Sori Lindblad overall has surfed incredibly well the first 2 events of the year too.
Yeah, it depends on what look we get, right? Is it going to be 6 to 8 foot offshore super tubos? Is it going to be tidal and funky and onshore? Are we going to have to move up to Moyles, little wedgie right-hander? Are we going across the peninsula to Belgisch, right? It's got to be one of the more difficult events on tour to you have to be so close to the forecast to kind of identify, I think these are the surfers that are going to have an edge, because they're all different waves, that's called the Portuguese pipeline for a reason. You could be seeing some of the best tubes of the season if Super Tubos is doing its thing. And at the same time, you could also be looking at a hyper wedgie right-hander up at Moyles if we're up there, where people like a Jordy Smith and a Lakey Peterson have very similar waves that they surf at home that are like that. So yeah, pay attention to the forecast. That'd be my 2 cents for the upcoming Portugal event.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and for some reason, I'm just going to say that it's really going to be those veteran guys that are going to be able to perform well there, just because as you said, it could either be 6 to 8 feet, or it could be dumpy 2 to 3 beach breaks like we saw last year in the opening rounds, where some people just have to rely on getting those 5s and 6s in those early rounds and then capitalize once it's actually good in the quarters onwards. Guys like Jack Robinson, of course. Barron, who's still at number 2. I feel like that could easily be an amazing way for him. I'm still going to go with Miggy. He's just going to be on my team from here all the way to, I would say, Punta Roca, just because, I don't know, I got a feeling about him right now. He's on a roll. He seems super happy. He's on new boards. And, of course, having requalified and now having 2 quarters, like, kind of settled down a little bit more. I just feel like he's in a groove. I wouldn't put it past Kanoa, though, to really stand out here just because he lives there a good amount of the year now. So,
yeah, good one.
Good pick. All right, listener questions. Thanks to everybody for writing in at the Lineup Pod. If we don't get to your question today, we're going to make sure to answer any single time we look into our DMs, and we're always going to do our best to be able to do that within a reasonable amount of time. First question, Dave, from a couple of great surfers right here from Southern California, at Logan_and_Marlo Harris. Where does "I just wanted to break a plate" and other funny colloquialisms come from? Not sure what they're referring to, but
I didn't hear it. Like, I'm not sure if it came from a surfer or I did catch a few from our fellow commentator Paul Evans.
Yeah.
He's a British dude. He's a great journalist, a really good surfer, and I love the way he commentates. But he throws a few out where I'm like, what does that mean?
I know. It's funny.
I don't know. I just wanted to break a plate. Like, I do think surfing, like, because it's like a global sport, you have a global tour, different venues, you've got a global CT class, you've got global commentators. It is a cool opportunity for cultural exchange and like phrases or food or, just ideas. Like, I do think it's a cool, I like getting exposed to different things as opposed to maybe trying to sand off everyone's edges as they kind of go into a global broadcast. But I don't know. Let's just focus on "I just wanted to break a plate." What is your best guess of what that means, Mitch?
I feel like they were just pissed and like pissed mad, not like, drunk. If I wanted to break a plate, I'd be like, dude, Hulk smash! Like, let me break a plate.
That's the read.
Yeah.
So maybe a competitor said it. Maybe they came in, they're on the glass with AJ, and AJ's going, "You looked really angry on that wave, and it worked out, and you got the score." What was your headspace like waiting for that wave to come to you? And someone was just like, "I just wanted to break a plate." It's like that's my theory.
Now that we're on the subject, just real quick, have you seen Brad Gerlach's wave key work and the amazing stuff he does with Taro and a lot of the other young kids? But he talks about how surfing has become like too ultra aggressive, and he wants to like bring it back and make sure that like, hey, like it's not supposed to be something that angers you or gets you mad. Like, bring the flow aspect into it. I like having a little bit of balance personally.
Right.
Depending on the section, I want to be like extra angry to be able to go into that and be like, dude, I'm letting everything out right here. And there's times where it's like, take a chill pill, tone it down a little bit. But I just want to get your thought on that.
I haven't exposed myself directly to the fountainhead of wave key, but I've definitely seen the results, and people I really respect talk about the results. It's something that I want to maybe bring Brad on and talk to him about, and maybe like scam some free lessons, because yeah, you're right. Like your Parker Coffins, your Taro Watanabes, like beautiful surfers. And I understand what Brad is saying. What I think of there is there's that Guy Ritchie film, The Gentleman, and then
ooh, great film, by the way.
The good film, but there's also a series, I think it's on Netflix, called The Gentleman. I might be getting that wrong. Whatever, they're related. Look it up. And very early on, there's a phrase that stuck out to me because it's about like a bunch of posh aristocrats in the UK having to deal with the underworld of crime. And the protagonist is described as having refined aggression, which I think that translates to surfing pretty well, and maybe is kind of what Brad's getting at, because it's not like you have to be aggressive at every single moment of your approach or every single section, but it's refined in that you are harnessing as much speed, you're flowing with the wave as much as possible, and when those opportunities present themselves, you are hitting it as aggressively as possible.
Right. I feel like there's a fine line between wanting to like translate what you're thinking into like an actual physical statement when it comes to surfing. And given that like your board is an extension of yourself when you're actually on a wave, like you always try to be the best artist possible. But there's times that like it's interpretive, you know, like you go to a museum and you don't like something just because it's comparative to others. No, you like it because it's unique. It's because it's their own little thing. So I feel like that's when we talk about, hey, personalities have a big thing to do with surfing. Like it really translates into the way they surf themselves too. And it's actually a great segue for our second question, Dave. At Rebecca Lynham 1. How about personality? We got the best one on tour. She says, get Katie on the podcast.
No problem. Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I don't know. No problem. No problem on our end. As I think we talked about earlier, like I'd love to have Katie on, talk to her. I'd love to have Chris Borst on, talk to him. You know, Katie, like, I mean, I'm 41. This is my 20th year at the ASPWSL. And, you know, it's funny because, you know, I think most people that have been here for a while and even people that work around the sport, I'm sure you can relate, is like, your career trajectory and your insights really marry up like era to era, you know? So when I started out, I was doing the North American tour. I was an intern. I was focusing a ton on like the juniors and the QS. And at the time, you know, you had surfers like Dusty Payne and Sebastian Zietz were like right at the bleeding edge of juniors age and starting to move into the QS. It was really exciting. It was that generation, right? And as I continued in my career, you know, I went up and did the women's tour as media manager, did the men's, all of it as a media manager, and then and on and on. And it's not that you're frozen in time during those really formative periods of your career, but those are your reference points, you know? So like I can call Dusty, right? Because I've worked with him for 15 years. And you end up having great insights with people. And I think the risk is like, I don't want to get so comfortable with what I know that I'm not constantly looking at who's coming up next, who's coming up next, who's coming up next. And so, you know, fortunately for me, I like you, was able to kind of identify Katie early on as being like, she's got something really different, even when she was really, really young. And it's been awesome to see how well she's done at the elite level. And I don't know her super duper well. Like we've talked a few times. She seems like a really cool person. And yeah, I'd love to have her on. So, yeah, maybe she's listening to the podcast and she's like, I would love to be on, or maybe not. Maybe she's going to be like, hey, thanks, but no thanks.
I feel like, you know, I'm just looking at her stats right now and everything in the last few years, but I've said it before and I'm so positive about what I'm about to say again, is that I think she's the most important surfer in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, there's just so many things that she does incredibly well. Her approaches on certain waves, the way she speaks, how authentic she is. But, you know, the fact that she hasn't changed either, I feel like she keeps herself so grounded. And it's just really important for a lot of young surfers to look at, especially on the women's side, where, you know, they've always kind of had a standard, and I know both of us can't really touch on the subject, though. Like, hey, you have to look a certain way, be a certain way to be successful. And like, she just throws everything out of the window, and she's like, you know what, dude, I'm just gonna be myself. I'm Katie from Oceanside. I love to hang out with my brother Tim. My parents are Alex and Jesse. I love them. They're really my foundation. I have my car that I like to go surfing in every single day at the North or South Jetty, depending on how good the waves are. And I'll see you out there. Like, if you see me in the lineup, say what's up. And I don't think you can say that about a lot of people. And the fact that you can say it about a 19-year-old surfer from Southern California is pretty freaking rad, if you ask me. And, you know, just seeing her over the course of her career, QS, juniors, where she could still be a junior. She actually denied the last 2 chances to surf in World Juniors, both this year in the Philippines and last year at home in Oceanside. Because she's like, dude, you know what? Like, I already achieved my goal. I'm on the CT. Like, I have nothing to prove. Only thing I need to prove now is winning the CT title. And she did that last year. But overall, you know, she's having such a major impact. And the only other person I've seen it on the women's side the last few years has been with Caroline Marks, because there was so much hype around her making her debut when she was that young. Now it's kind of the same way with Erin Brooks, but we've seen her through social media before because of the impact of global
Sure.
social media, right? But like Katie's like, she just doesn't fit a norm. And that's why I personally like her so much. I think she's so punk. She's so cool. Like, I think she deserves, to eventually be considered one of the all-time greats, because I truly think she is going to be one.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay.
Let's go into our final one. And it's a real good question. I'm going to have a tough time struggling with this one. At Jake Gisham _ after event 2, are there any predictions of a rookie who will win a single event this year? I'm glad I get to go second, Dave, because I was already wrong with Aaron Brooks. But let's hear it. Who do you have that you feel like is going to win an event as a rookie this season?
Yeah, like will or if, right? I think so if you look at the men's side, unless I'm missing someone, you've got Joel Vaughn, Jackson Bunch, 11 and 12. Shout out to Joel Vaughn. He did very well, like across both events too. I'm really impressed. And George Pitar at 14th. So that's a really nice little bunched rookie class in terms of like rookie of the year race early on. And then you've got Al Cleland. I think he's a threat maybe at certain venues just because he's shown that he's not scared of like really critical waves. And then you got Edgard Grosjean, first wave of the season at Backdoor, and then first wave at Surf Abu Dhabi. So that's pretty fun.
Poor kid.
Marco Mignot. I'll be honest, I don't think at this point I've seen anything where any of the rookies on the men's side are likely going to win a CT event this year. It could absolutely happen. Like they're very, very good, but it's hard, right? I think like when it has happened in the past, you've just had a huge like momentum jump, like a step function increase of like this person is bringing something completely new to the tour. You mentioned Katie before, and I think that was evident from her rookie season. On the women's side, however, you've got Vahine Fierro from Tahiti and Aaron Brooks from Canada. They're 8 and 9 right now. Both of them have already won CT events as wild cards. Mm-hmm. You got Bella Kenworthy, she's in there at 11, and we mentioned Nadia Aerostarbe. Maybe she'll come back with an injury. Let's see if she ends up getting a rookie season out of 2025. But I would say it's much more likely that we see a Vahine or an Aaron win an event, and I think Vahine has real opportunity at places like Tehopu. We've seen her win out there before. She's really untouched. I think Aaron, it's maybe a slower start than the hype machine would have had us believe, but it's still a good start so far. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Aaron win an event this year. That'd be my pick. I don't know, Mitch, what do you think?
Neither would I. Of course, I think Aaron is the one outside of Vahine with the highest chances just because they actually have won events. Just from a confidence perspective, that's like the major thing. People struggle with confidence, and I don't feel like for them it's really been a major issue. I think with Aaron, it's really just been managing expectations, because what I saw from Vahine at this event, like I didn't pick her to really be one of those people that was going to make it into finals day. And obviously she shut me the heck up. There were a couple ways that she drew a line to stall into the barrel, which I was a huge fan of. And I think those little separate things that kind of pull you aside from everybody else, especially as we mentioned, a wave that can get a little bit repetitive, like those point of difference makes a huge difference. Vahine's backhand is really good. I feel like Jeffreys Bay, Margs, Bells, depending on the size, could be huge for her. I'm still going to go with Aaron over everybody else as a true rookie on the women's side. I want to say that Bella Kenworthy, if she gets to a point where she's fully healthy, she can really push the way she needs to, there's a chance she could make it into a final. I don't know about winning, but definitely I see a final in Bella's future if she's able to stay healthy. And
And
Jason,
she has won on the CS too, right? Like, and I think that's another part of it. I think there's probably been surfers who have qualified historically that never actually won. They were just very consistent, and they were surfers that maybe made it to the CT and never won a CT. Most surfers that make it to the CC do not win events, you know? I think there is a special kind of element to knowing you can win. And for someone like Bella, who's won at the CS level, I think part of that does translate to the CT because it's a muscle memory of like, I do deserve to be here. I'm performing well enough. And when I'm in the final, I'm here to win.
True. And I think the most important part is that once you feel that sense of euphoria, you don't want to never not feel it again. And I feel like that's why Kelly was just so freaking competitive over the years too. He was like, dude, like, this is like my drug. Like, I need it in order to survive. So good point. I hadn't really thought about that too much, but you're actually extremely on point right there. Isn't that crazy? How, and that's not just in surfing, that's in any sport. Like, even if you made it to the major leagues, if you made it to the NFL, Premier League soccer, or football worldwide, like, just because you make it there, it doesn't guarantee that you're ever going to win. And I would say, 97% of people that have ever competed at a professional level, they're never actually going to win a championship. Like, that is, ouch. I don't want to think about that anymore.
And every single one of those surfers that have ever made the CT, for years, if not decades before they made the CT, were told they were going to be a world champion.
True.
And that's the crazy thing. And it happens in all sports, right? It's like you are getting that you got that good because you had the support mechanism around you. And part of the psychological support was elevating you to this pedestal of would-be world champion. And as we said, only a very small percentage of them who make the CT ever even win an event, let alone a world title. So it's tough. And that goes back to the point, which is like, could these rookies win a CT this year? Absolutely. Like, the men, the women, the performance levels are so close. The talent is so sharp at that end. Anyone can win a CT event. Anyone can win any heat. I think if I had to put money on it, it would be Erin Brooks, just based on the rest of the season and what we know she has in her. But really appreciate all the questions. Thanks to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod. If we didn't get to your question, please hit us in the DMs and we will respond. We try to respond to everyone. Mitch, that ends my own personal Mitch Triple Crown. I do want to talk to you again very, very soon on the podcast. We talk pretty much every day, but looking forward to listening to you on the ground in Portugal, and you and I will talk on the podcast after that event. That's another episode of the lineup.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.